What is the most disgusting thing you have ever done that you took pleasure in? My wife and I had two wonderful daughters, 13 and 10, and a pretty healthy relationship. At some point things started to appear off. She got very clingy to her phone all of a sudden, made sure to delete the saved password feature on our common PC, and started having phone calls that suddenly ended when I came into the room. You can probably guess what it was. Now having 15 years of marriage behind us, I was hoping it wasn't what it obviously seemed to be. So one day when she told me she was going to spend some time with the girls, I decided to follow her. Sure enough, I find her driving to a hotel to meet with a guy I will call Steve. To say it was a gut punch was an understatement. I literally cried for an hour straight. After I was done with my self-wallowing phase, I decided the best course was getting even. I thought of several scenarios that may or may not have involved me hurting Steve. Eventually I decided to do things more civilly and more importantly legally, but only just. So the first part of the plan was gathering evidence. I could have just gotten a pie, but I had something better in mind. So one day when my wife was at her job and the kids at school, I installed some small secret cameras and microphones I had bought. Due to the setup of our bedroom, I even managed to get one perfectly overlooking the bed. I didn't however use them while I was at home. So a couple of days pass, when I proposed to my wife that the second to next weekend I should take the girls on a trip and stay a night too. I more often than not was the one cooking. I took a far more active role in raising the girls and showed them a lot more patience and attention. She was usually busy working or drinking, so me going alone with the girls on a trip wasn't that weird. So 2 weeks pass, in which time I get my affairs in order and contact a lawyer to write up a separation agreement that would involve me keeping residents in custody. I go on the trip, try to not give anything away to the girls and wait and see if Steve and my wife fall into the trap. When I returned I checked the recordings of the weekend, and sure enough it's a 36-hour fest. When they weren't doing the deed, the dialogue was something even better. I found out that Steve had a wife, but even worse, they also talked about me. And I heard the obvious character assassination that I expected about how small my PP was, an insecurity of mine, how I didn't satisfy her. But there was some really hurtful stuff, like her telling Steve some of my deepest secrets and shameful stories that I had only told her about, just so they could have a laugh. She even told him about my dope story and how I attempted to take my life when I was 16. So at this point I didn't have any doubts on what to do. The next day when the kids left, but before my wife left, I confronted her with the video and told her that either she signs the separation agreement and leaves the house or the girls are going to receive an in-depth explanation of all the positions in which mommy cheated on daddy. I wasn't going to do that. Just to be clear, I love my daughters too much, but I put the threat there and she was too emotional to realize my bluff. She went through all the stages, denying everything, trying to bargain, threatening me, and getting angry. I let it go through all that stuff. Eventually she signed the paper and she departed that very evening after she told her goodbyes to the girls. I didn't show or tell the girls anything graphic. I was always very honest with them, which is another reason why I was always the favorite parent, so I just said that mommy had been unfaithful. The younger took some time figuring it out, but that was made up by my older getting mightily upset. She had just gotten her first boyfriend, as I'm not sure the term really applies at that age, but she knew enough of the world to get mad big time. This would be important at a would-be custody battle, as though she did for the moment agree to give over custody. I feared, and I was right to fear, that she would try and fight me for the kids. What I didn't expect was for her to use her visitation rights to talk crap about me. Basically she started telling my younger kid about how it was all my fault for not forgiving her. Her lawyer even started demanding she receive custody. So I finally activated my revenge plan. Enter trip to South Carolina. Why South Carolina? Simple. Fort Sumter. I really wanted my daughters to see it. I definitely did not go there because it is one of the last places where revenge porn isn't illegal, and where I could upload my wife and Steve's doings and intimate moments with no worries on the internet and other such sites, as you cannot be prosecuted for crimes that weren't illegal when and where they were committed. I especially made sure to include the clip where Steve could not get it up. I sent the links to my wife's employer, her clients, and everybody in her line of work just to be sure, to Steve's wife and to his firm. Steve soon got a divorce. I feel sorry for his wife as she was an innocent victim in all of this, but I think it's better that she found out. As for my wife, this was the end of any chance to get custody. She soon got fired from her job of 8 years. I got custody. Yes, due to her being unemployed, I got no alimony, but honestly I make enough money to sustain both me and the girls, so I don't care, and I'm good enough at caring for them and they are old enough to allow me to have a full-time job. Several months later, my wife is still unemployed. Last time I spoke to her wife she threatened to come and take my life and how this will be revenge for ruining hers. What's your story of seeing somebody's mental state degrade? When mom was 14 she came home from school one day to find her mom laying in bed. Dinner was started but her mom was in bed. Lay beside me, wrap your arms around me. She held her mom, their hands clenched tight, as she passed away. Then she got up, sent her little brother to get daddy in the field. She finished preparing supper. Those kids had to have something to eat. A few years later her baby sister was killed in an accident. The local preacher gave her a ride to church, and took advantage of the opportunity. He forced himself onto her and gave her permanent psychological damage. The local madam made money available for her to go to college. An act of kindness. She always said her oldest brother and her dad gave her the money for school. They were poor dirt farmers. I didn't tell her. Years later, when I discovered where they got the funds, she got pregnant, on a day when that was not done. So they got married, had 2 more, started careers. Then her husband got cancer, and passed away. In her arms as she held his hand, She was a 28-year-old widow with 3 kids. She remarried a guy she thought was a dreamer. They moved away from family support group to a remote area. He wasn't as much a dreamer as a lunatic, but she loved him, so she stood by as he treated her kids horribly. He was so harsh with her kids. They had another one. They moved all over the world. Then he had his life taken in a car accident. She remarried a 3rd time. By this time I was an adult. She ended up raising 4 of her own and 3 of his. Mom could cook a fancy meal for a bunch of strangers on short notice. She could design and build a house. She was an amazing nurse. She was the favorite aunt. She was a charming travel partner with her 3rd husband. She drove a hard bargain, was an incredible seamstress, and when all the kids were gone away, moved out of the house, she could relax. She finally lost it. Made no sense. Saw men in trees watching her through the windows. Paid private investigators to look for listening devices under the house, in the walls. She started driving. Drove her car all over the country with her big dog. Went to visit neighbors she had last seen 40 years before. Drove to corners of the country propelled by severe paranoia. Slept in her car. Kept coffee cans to pee in. A strange lady called me. Said that Mom was with her, obviously lost. Mom taught her how to bake bread. She had tricked Mom into getting enough information to find me and call me and let me know where she was. Then Mom drove off. One day she showed up at my house. We sat down to talk. She asked to use the restroom. She took a while. I went to check on her just in time to see her car driving away. 8 years later Mom lived on the road, bouncing around the country. She would settle in somewhere because she liked the flowers or because her dog seemed to like that stretch of road. I know of 2 houses she somehow bought during that time. One just sat empty. One night at 2 a.m. my sister got a call. Come get me. Sis got to the intersection and Mom's fingers were bleeding from chewing the nails. She tricked her to get in the car and drove to the hospital. Mom was in the psych ward for a long time, and finally settled down, just in time to get the cancer diagnosis and go through that process. One late night in the hospital I asked her, Mom, how did you get through all that? She looked at me. I did my best for you. I was never the best, but I tried so hard. I'm sorry if I let you down. As tears fell from her face. Cancer took its course. I held her as she passed, hands clenched tight. Has a video game ever ruined your life? So I just moved into my boyfriend's apartment in January and brought my Switch over. We are both Zelda fanatics and he wanted to play, which I was cool with because it was my all-time favorite game, and I love watching gameplay just as much as actually playing. All was good until they released Tears of the Kingdom. He works during the day and I'm a streamer so I work at night, but I'm spending my days running our errands so I don't have much time to play during the day. In the beginning I was only letting myself play for 2 hours before he got home from work, then I would cook dinner. That slowly crept into me playing more after he went to bed. Then I started playing after dinner while he was watching TV. I would bring the console out on the porch so we could still spend physical time together. Then it crept into me playing on the TV in a different room, completely neglecting him. When I tell you, there is absolutely no sense of time when playing this game. It just basically doesn't exist. I feel like I'm on it 45 minutes then boom, it's 5 a.m. I basically am getting in bed when he's getting up to go to work. I just downloaded it last week and I've already logged 50 hours. This happened 3 nights in a row, and it's starting to be a problem obviously. But last night was the last straw. As he was going to bed he told me it was time to get off and I should go to bed. He tried to physically grab my controller and I yanked it out of his hand and yelled at him for it. It's getting so bad I'm also not streaming hardly at all and I've been canceling all of my plans with friends, family, etc. I kept playing that night until 1 a.m. when my TV started tilting off the mount. I'm pretty short so I had to put my knee up on it to tilt the TV back and the whole glass stand fell off the wall and shattered all over the wall. Obviously he heard this loud bang and came out and just laughed at me and told me to leave. I have a second apartment in the same building where I do my streaming, so I went down there and was freaking out. So what do?
It's 2 a.m. I refuse to leave that mess just sitting there for me to wake up and see and be reminded of my severe Tears of the Kingdom addiction.
So naturally, I call my usual handyman and shockingly he answers. It's 2 a.m. He said he can be there in 30 minutes. I meet him in the parking garage and he brought this huge truck with a trailer of tools. Finally we get up to the destruction apartment and he locked me out. So I have to start banging on the door, waking this poor man up again, and he answers the door unclothed and sees me standing there with some random guy at 3 a.m. He just looks at me, shakes his head, lets us in and goes to bed. I tell handyman we gotta be quick and quiet but this has to fixed ASAP. He started to fix it but begins drilling it into the wall which is connected into the bedroom. Obviously boyfriend is beyond mad. Whatever, TV stand fireplace thing is fixed. But guess what I decide to do? Take my Switch and keep playing in the closet. I black out at some point, probably around 5 a.m., with no recollection of anything after I got in the closet, sprawled out on the carpet floor, controller still in my hand and a side of ranch and a quesadilla in the other. I crawl into our bed and woke up at around 10:30 a.m. I start looking for my Switch. I look in the closet, the bedroom, the living room. It's nowhere. I go down to our second apartment where my boyfriend is working. We both use it for work, thinking maybe I brought it down there. Nope. I sit down, look him in the eyes and go, "Where's the Switch?" He just smiles and says, "You know where it is." Then it dawned on me. "You put it in your safe, didn't you?" Yup. I lose my mind. Like I know I was getting really addicted, but I'm mostly mad. I know it's probably for my own good and the good of our relationship, but I'm so mad right now I can't hardly speak to him. I want to cry and scream and I feel like I'm going through withdrawals. I love him but I also want to unalive him and myself.